I was flat on my back. A titanium rod fused into my spine. When a process server handed me papers accusing me of stalking my ex-wife across multiple cities, I laughed at first, not because it was funny, but because I physically couldn't walk 10 feet without collapsing. And yet these documents claimed I'd followed her everywhere for months. Then I noticed something heavier fall from the envelope, 12 photographs. Each one showed a man standing in the exact places I was accused of being. Same height, same build, same receding gray hairline. In one photo, he even wore a jacket identical to mine. And in that instant, disbelief turned to something sharper. This wasn't a mistake. Someone had gone to the trouble of putting my face at the scene. If I wasn't there, then who was standing in my place? I was flat on my back. A titanium rod fused into my spine. When a process server handed me papers accusing me of stalking my ex-wife across multiple cities, I laughed at first, not because it was funny, but because the absurdity of it collided with the physical truth. I couldn't walk more than 10 feet without collapsing. Yet the document in my shaking hands claimed I had followed her to her workplace, her sister's cottage, medical appointments, over a span of 4 months. The dates were precise. March through June, the same months I'd been monitored around the clock in a hospital bed, learning to stand without risking permanent damage to my spine. My name is Robert Harrison. I'm 63, and I thought I'd already lived through the worst of my life. My construction business collapsed. My marriage fell apart, and my health broke under the weight of it all. But this was something different. This wasn't just a lawsuit. It was a story being written about me while I was helpless. The papers weren't emotional, they were cold, precise, confident, demanding damages and a restraining order, describing me as an obsessive, dangerous ex-husband while I couldn't even function as a normal adult. My mind raced as I scanned the allegations. How could anyone believe this? How could my ex-wife claim I had been present in multiple cities on dates I was physically unable to leave the hospital? The emotional stakes landed like a hammer. My reputation, my character, my family's trust, all under fire. The disbelief threatened to turn into panic. My heartbeat sinking with the absurdity of it all. And then it happened. Something heavy slid out of the envelope and landed on my chest. Photographs, printed in color, 12 of them. Each one showed a man in the background of places I was accused of being. Same height, same build, same receding gray hairline, same wire-rimmed glasses I'd worn for years. In one, he even wore a navy windbreaker identical to one in my closet. My stomach turned. Every instinct screamed that this wasn't a coincidence or sloppy memory. My mind flailed between denial and horror. Someone had put my face at the scene. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to make me look guilty. And I had no immediate way to prove otherwise. My hospital bed suddenly felt like a trap, a cage from which I had to fight back intellectually. Because physically, I was powerless. The documents didn't just accuse me, they painted me as dangerous, unstable, obsessed, capable of things I couldn't have done. And the threat wasn't just legal, it was social, emotional, and deeply personal. If anyone believed it, what would they do? Could my ex-wife report me to police? Could strangers think I was a threat? Could my children hear the accusations and fear me? The anxiety compounded. I tried to reassure myself. Hospital records, security footage, nursing logs, these would clear everything up. But the reality hit hard. Perception moves faster than proof. A carefully staged photo, a few well-timed calls, a confident accusation, all it takes for fear to spread. My chest tightened as I stared at the photos again, seeing someone who looked impossibly like me standing where I physically could not have been. This wasn't confusion or exaggeration, and it wasn't a random mistake. It was deliberate. I realized, with a chill I would feel for weeks, that someone had calculated this, chosen the timing, chosen the locations, and chosen my identity to weaponize it. Someone wanted me to be seen as a threat while I was entirely defenseless. And in that instant, as I held the photographs, my mind raced with the one terrifying question: if I wasn't there, then who was standing in my place? The next morning, I woke to a chilling realization: the accusations weren't going away. My lawyer called after I emailed him the envelope's contents. "Robert, this is actually good news," he said. "Good news? I'd just been accused of stalking my ex-wife across multiple cities while bedridden for months. And the word, good, felt surreal. Why? I asked. Because we have proof, he explained. Hospital records, nursing logs, security footage, you were monitored 24/7. You couldn't have been anywhere near the locations she claims. Relief should have washed over me, but it didn't. The photographs, the ones showing someone who looked exactly like me standing in the alleged locations, were burned into my mind. Then came the phone calls. The opposing lawyer claimed I had made 17 disturbing calls to my ex-wife during my hospital stay. 17 calls. I had made exactly 2, both purely informational. My stomach dropped. Someone had spoofed my number, making it look like I was harassing her while completely immobilized. My lawyer instructed me to pull my records immediately. The next day, the proof arrived, 2 calls. No more. Not 17. Not 10. 2. My heart raced. If someone could falsify phone calls, what else could they fake? Then the eyewitness reports hit. Multiple people claimed to have seen me in locations I physically couldn't reach. They were sure it was me, yet my hospital logs confirmed I hadn't even left the floor. It was methodical, terrifying, and impossible to fight in real time. My daughter had visited only a few times, my son and brother once each, and beyond that, my entire world consisted of nurses, therapists, and the elderly man in the next bed who watched game shows at full volume. Someone had mapped my life, studied my schedule, and planted a look-alike, weaponizing my absence. My chest tightened, panic gnawed at my mind, and a single horrifying thought emerged: the world could easily believe this story. It wasn't just a legal issue anymore. My reputation, my family, my very identity were at risk. All the proof stacked against me, yet my reality, bedridden, helpless, innocent, remained unchanged. And in that instant, staring at the photos again, the phone records, and the impossibly confident eyewitness claims, I asked myself something sharper than before: if someone could make it look like me, how far would they go? And why target me? By the 4th day, it was clear this wasn't something patience would fix. Someone had already decided who I was in the public record, and waiting felt like surrender. My lawyer suggested a private investigator, not as a solution, but as a risk. This could help, he warned. Or it could escalate things if whoever's doing this feels threatened. That warning stayed with me when I met the investigator, a former cop with tired eyes and a habit of listening longer than he spoke. I laid everything out: the lawsuit, the photographs, the spoofed phone calls, the months I'd spent monitored in a hospital bed while my life apparently continued without me. He didn't interrupt. He didn't reassure me either. When I finished, he leaned back and said something that unsettled me more than comfort would have. I don't know yet if this is sloppy or sophisticated, and that matters. He studied the photos again, longer this time, tracing the background details instead of the face. If this is random obsession, it burns out. If it's calculated, it adapts. That word again, calculated. He asked questions he didn't have answers to: who had access to my schedule? Who benefited most from me being seen as unstable? Who had the patience to wait until I was physically trapped? When the conversation turned to my ex-wife's new relationship, he paused. How real is this person? He asked. That question changed everything. 2 days later, he called me back. His voice was different, quieter, tighter. We've got a problem, he said. The man she'd been seeing online, the one who vaguely resembled me in the photos, the profile didn't just look suspicious. It collapsed under scrutiny. No verifiable history. Friends that didn't interact. Photos pulled from unrelated accounts. It wasn't exaggerated. It wasn't embellished. It wasn't misunderstood. It was fake. Fully fabricated. There was a silence on the line as that sank in. If someone was willing to invent a human being to anchor this story, then the photographs weren't the crime, they were the decoration. The real danger was the structure underneath. The investigator didn't launch into theory. He didn't explain psychology like a lecture. He said one thing instead: people do this when they know you can't fight back. That landed harder than any analysis. I was recovering, medicated, isolated, barely able to sit upright for long periods. Whoever built this narrative had timed it perfectly. He warned me next, not gently: if we push too fast, they may double down, destroy records, shift stories, or escalate. Escalate how? He didn't spell it out, and he didn't need to. Arrests don't require truth. Only the question is whether we find it before they do something irreversible. That's when it hit me: this wasn't a mystery unfolding anymore. It was a countdown. And whatever this person had planned next wasn't designed to confuse me, it was designed to end the argument entirely. The call came in early, and before the investigator said anything else, He told me to sit down. Not because he had answers, but because what he'd found changed the balance. A surveillance camera near a downtown cafe had captured the man from the photographs clearly for the first time. Not just a resemblance. Not just the same build. The same posture. The same jacket. For a few seconds, my stomach dropped, because my brain still fought the obvious. Then the camera angle shifted. The reflection in the window sharpened. And there it was, a dark tattoo curling along his neck. Unmistakable. Deliberate. Permanent. I stared at the still frame in silence. I don't have a tattoo. I've never had one. I never could. For the first time since this began, there was something that couldn't be explained away, reframed, or argued into ambiguity. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't confusion. This was proof. The investigator didn't rush past it. He let the moment sit. This, he finally said, is what breaks the illusion. And that's when the fear deepened instead of easing. Because proof doesn't end situations like this, it accelerates them. He explained it carefully, almost reluctantly. The moment someone like this realizes they've left a trace, they don't retreat. They react. They move faster. They take risks. They try to regain control. The story they've been building suddenly feels threatened. And threatened people don't de-escalate. They compress time. I realized then that this wasn't just evidence against him. It was a trigger. Every step we took from that moment on had to assume he would sense pressure, even if he didn't know exactly where it came from. The investigator warned me not to celebrate, not to confront, not to move impulsively. You don't want him realizing the mask slipped, he said, because once he knows that, he'll try to finish what he started. Finish how? He didn't answer directly, and he didn't need to. False narratives don't collapse quietly. They turn aggressive. They reach for authority, urgency, sympathy. Anything that locks perception in place before the truth catches up. As we reviewed the timeline again, something chilling clicked into focus. The impersonation wasn't just about my ex-wife. It was anchored to me, my absenk. My vulnerability. Y, my inability to appear and contradict the image being projected. This man hadn't just copied my appearance. He'd exploited the exact window where I couldn't physically disprove high. That realization made my chest tight. The investigator's tone shifted the N, from analytical to directive. From now you don't change routines without telling M. You don't show up early or late anywhere. You don't walk into places unplanned. And you don't assume you're invisible. Invisible. That word stuck with M. I had thought my weakness made me irrelevant. It had made me usable. The proof was real. The crack exists. But so did the Donge. By uncovering high. We hadn't ended the threat, we'd activated and as the investigator ended the cow. He gave me one final instruction that made the stakes unmistakable. Until this is resolved. You move like someone who's already being watched, because the war's mistake now would be giving him an opportunity to rewrite the story one last time. The meeting didn't feel like justice walking in. It felt like exposure. The kind that makes your skin crawl because you don't know who's watching. I noticed him immediately. Sitting too comfortably. Legs crossed. Posture relaxed in a way that felt rehearsed. Kevin. Or Dennis. Or whatever name he was wearing that day. He looked at me once. Just long enough to register recognition. And then looked away like I wasn't the point anymore. That was the first warning. Graham began laying out the evidence slowly. Deliberately. Hospital timelines, recovery limitations, the physical impossibility of me being anywhere but a bed for 4 straight months. I expected Kevin to interrupt, to deny, to lash out. Instead, he smiled faintly, as if he already knew something we didn't. That smile unsettled me more than anger ever could. When Marcus finally slid the photograph onto the table, the cafe image, the angle catching the tattoo near the wrist, the room shifted. Not exploded. Shifted. Kevin didn't panic. He leaned forward, studied it, then looked directly at Patricia. You told me he had no distinguishing marks, he said calmly. The words landed harder than the evidence. I watched Patricia's face change as confusion gave way to doubt. Not about him, but about everything she thought she knew. That was his last move. He wasn't defending himself, he was destabilizing her. Graham spoke. Fast now, pointing out the inconsistency, the impossibility. The overlap with my hospital stay. But Kevin wasn't listening anymore. He was watching me. You really think this fixes it? He said quietly, just loud enough for me to hear. People don't remember evidence. They remember how something felt. My stomach dropped. That was the moment I understood this wasn't about winning. This was about damage already done. Marcus stood, voice steady but eyes sharp, and said Kevin needed to leave immediately. No cuffs, no dramatic arrest, just removal. Kevin stood without resistance, buttoned his jacket, and as he passed behind Patricia, he leaned in and whispered something I couldn't hear. She flinched. That flinch told me everything. Security escorted him out, but the air he left behind felt heavier than when he'd arrived. The meeting ended awkwardly, unfinished, like a sentence cut off mid-word. Outside, Marcus admitted what no one else would say, without him being caught in the act again. Charges would take time, paperwork, process, delay. Delay was dangerous. That night, alone in my apartment, I replayed Kevin's words over and over. He was right about one thing. Even when you prove the truth, suspicion doesn't evaporate. It lingers. It stains. I checked my phone compulsively, expecting another spoofed call, another photograph, another escalation. I realized then that the confrontation hadn't ended anything. It had exposed how fragile identity really is. How easily someone can wear your face, speak in your voice, rewrite your narrative while you're helpless. I had wanted vindication. What I got was awareness. Awareness that systems don't protect you by default. That truth doesn't arrive on time. That even when a predator slips, the consequences don't reverse cleanly. The danger hadn't vanished. It had simply changed form. And as I lay awake that night, back aching, mind racing, one thought kept returning, heavier than fear. Even if Kevin never touched my life again, he had already altered how safe the world felt, and that was something I could never undo. In the days after the confrontation, the city felt different, quieter, but heavier. The air in my apartment no longer carried the immediate terror of Kevin's presence. Yet every sound, every unknown phone notification, made my chest tighten. I spent hours reviewing every detail of what had happened, replaying conversations, rereading logs, double-checking dates, timelines, and photographs. It wasn't just about proving I hadn't stalked Patricia anymore. It was about understanding how much of my life had been rewritten by someone else while I was physically helpless. Graham worked tirelessly, filing motions, ensuring our evidence was airtight, requesting forensic analysis on the spoofed calls, and preparing for the inevitable courtroom follow-ups. Patricia, for her part, was cautious but grateful. She called once, voice shaky, saying, "I never knew. I didn't realize how much he'd done to both of us." And that voice carried months of fear, doubt, and guilt, a reminder that even when the predator is gone, the aftermath lives in the people he touched. I couldn't hold her pain, but I could witness it, validate it, and try to untangle the lies that had ensnared her perception. Meanwhile, my own health demanded attention. Months of immobility had left my muscles weak, my balance fragile, and every step outside the apartment a careful negotiation with pain. Physical therapy became not just a medical necessity, but a psychological anchor. Every small victory, walking a block without collapsing, climbing the stairs to the park, felt like reclaiming tiny fragments of life that Kevin had tried to steal by proxy. And yet, the shadow of those months remained. Every email, every voicemail, every random stranger's glance carried a flicker of paranoia. What if someone else had watched, copied, or recorded? What if there were more versions of me out there, crafted to destabilize my world? Technology had been his weapon: spoofed numbers, stolen images, fake profiles, and now, ironically, it became my shield. A record of timestamps, security footage, and call logs proving my reality. Slowly, methodically, I began rebuilding my sense of agency. I documented every detail, organized the evidence chronologically, and started mentoring my children through the same lessons about vigilance and verification. I reconnected with friends I had lost touch with during recovery, people who could witness my daily life, anchor my story, and remind me that reality was mine to reclaim. The lawsuit against me was formally dropped, and Kevin faced charges that would take months to wind through the courts. But the victory felt hollow in some ways. The legal system had delivered justice externally, but internally, trust and perception had been fractured. Patricia moved temporarily to her sister's cottage, and though we exchanged occasional messages, it was clear the past would never fully reset. The predator had left his mark, subtle but permanent, on how we viewed safety, identity, and the fragility of reputation. And yet, there was a strange clarity in the chaos. I realized that survival wasn't just about avoiding danger, it was about documenting truth relentlessly, acting decisively when opportunity arose, and surrounding oneself with people who saw reality as it was, not as the predator wanted it to appear. Slowly, the titanium rod in my spine became less a symbol of limitation and more a reminder of resilience. Every ache, every careful step, every measured breath reminded me that even when life is hijacked by forces beyond control, careful planning, vigilance, and relentless evidence gathering can restore a measure of control. And as I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights reflect off the river, I understood something fundamental: the world had been shaken, identities had been manipulated, fears implanted, but the truth, painstakingly assembled, documented, and defended, could survive. Kevin had tried to rewrite our lives, but in the end, he had only reminded us how fragile control can be, and how powerful it becomes when you refuse to surrender it. And that, more than anything else, was the lesson I carried forward. Even weeks after Kevin's removal, the quiet moments carried weight. I could walk through the neighborhood, grab coffee, or sit in the park, but each step reminded me of how easily life could be rewritten without warning. Every glance at a stranger's face, every unexpected call, made my chest tighten. It wasn't paranoia, it was knowledge. Patricia had retreated to her sister's cottage, and our messages were cautious, polite, careful, almost formal. We had survived the storm together, yet separately, as if the ordeal had created a bond we couldn't name, a shared trauma that left no space for normalcy. At home, I went through the motions: exercises, walks, stretching, physiotherapy, but my mind constantly replayed Kevin's actions, the fabricated calls, the photographs, the way he had manipulated perception to make the impossible feel real. Technology had been both his weapon and my savior, but the memory of how easily it could be twisted lingered like a shadow over everything I did online. Every text I sent, every social media update I dared to post. Friends reached out, and I tried to lean on them, but I realized how isolated I had been during recovery. Months of immobility, compounded by the legal threat, had created gaps in routine, in connection, in certainty. Even the simplest interactions required an undercurrent of vigilance. I double-checked emails, verified every call, made sure no detail could be twisted against me again. There were moments of exhaustion, of anger, and sometimes despair, not because I feared Kevin physically, but because he had shown me how fragile trust and reputation could be. My children visited when they could, and each hug, each conversation, reminded me why I had fought so hard to reclaim my life. They had witnessed my vulnerability, my helplessness, and now they saw me rebuilding. Even so, the residue of fear lingered in small ways: a quick look over my shoulder, hesitation before opening the door to a stranger, lingering thoughts about what might have been posted online without my knowledge. Slowly, I began returning to work, considering teaching construction management, thinking about projects I could handle without risking my spine, testing the boundaries of independence I had lost for months. Every small victory, a 20-minute walk without pain, a successful meeting with my lawyer, a conversation with Patricia that didn't unravel into accusation, became a benchmark, proof that life could continue while acknowledging the past. And yet, deep down, I knew some scars weren't visible, weren't quantifiable, and wouldn't fade quickly. Kevin had left more than legal chaos in his wake. He had left a lesson in vigilance, in the fragility of identity, in the way perception could be manipulated and weaponized. I found myself telling younger friends, my children, anyone who would listen, document everything. Trust but verify. No system is foolproof, and even when truth is clear, perception can still be twisted. Living with the shadow meant accepting that normalcy wasn't perfect, that safety wasn't guaranteed, and that control was always earned, often painstakingly, step by step. The city lights at night reminded me of the distance traveled, of nights spent staring at ceilings, wondering how reality could be bent so easily. And yet, they also reminded me that life continues, that resilience matters more than fear, and that even after being targeted and manipulated, it was possible to exist in the world without surrendering to it. Some days were quiet, almost peaceful. Others were reminders that the storm wasn't entirely over. That vigilance was permanent. But slowly, I felt a growing strength, a recognition that the person who had tried to rewrite my life could not claim it, and that even in the shadow, I could choose how to move forward. Even months later, the world still felt fragile. Kevin Dutton was behind bars, facing charges for identity theft and harassment. Patricia had moved temporarily to her sister's cottage, and our interactions were polite but cautious. Yet relief was tangled with a persistent unease that someone had so deliberately manipulated and terrorized us both. Physically, I was stronger, walking 40 minutes a day, regaining independence stolen by surgery and months in a hospital bed. But mentally, the scars lingered, subtle and insistent. Every photograph, every spoofed call, every fabricated digital trail a reminder of how effortlessly someone had tried to rewrite my life while I was powerless. And though the truth had saved me, it had not erased the awareness that the system, human trust, and even love could be weaponized, leaving me questioning my surroundings, my phone, even my own perceptions. While Patricia admitted that she still occasionally doubted her senses, and that realization shook me more than Kevin ever could. Innocence offers no protection when deception is patient and calculated. I began cautiously rebuilding my life, mentoring and teaching, turning experience into defense, understanding that the very technology that could destroy could also protect. Yet unease lingered, because every glance at a stranger, every notification, could hide manipulation, and the predator, though imprisoned, had reminded me of a terrifying truth: the most dangerous threats are silent, unseen, and patient, striking when you are weakest. But vigilance, documentation, and persistence could reclaim what was nearly stolen. The titanium rod in my spine, a literal support through helplessness, became a metaphor for resilience, a daily reminder that strength is deliberate, painful, and slow, that survival is possible, but innocence does not guarantee safety. And as I walked along the river, I realized what unsettled me most was how quickly the world could believe lies. How fragile the line between truth and fabrication really is, that even with danger removed, the lesson and vulnerability remain permanent. And though I was upright, free, and recovering, I would never again be naive, because truth is only powerful when wielded relentlessly. Systems may fail, and predators may still strike in ways you cannot anticipate. And the predator was gone, yes, but the lesson, and the lingering vulnerability, would stay with me forever. Just when I thought the nightmare had ended, a quiet reminder arrived that danger doesn't always announce itself. A small, anonymous envelope slipped under my apartment door one evening, unmarked, containing only a single photograph of me leaving the hospital months earlier, walking toward a taxi with my titanium rod barely visible beneath my jacket, and scribbled in the corner were 3 chilling words: "We're still watching." My heart stopped. Every careful step I had taken, every security measure, every digital trail meticulously preserved now felt fragile, as if someone had been observing my life the whole time, not to protect, but to remind me how vulnerable I truly was. Patricia's voice echoed in my mind, the fear she had felt believing Kevin's lies, the subtle doubt that had lingered even after his arrest, and suddenly I realized this wasn't just about her or me. It was about how easily perception could be manipulated, how quickly reality could be rewritten in someone else's image. I checked the locks, the cameras, every window, every potential blind spot, but the photograph didn't have to be taken yesterday. It was a message, a psychological tether pulling me back into a state of hyper-awareness, forcing me to relive helplessness I thought I had left behind. My phone pinged with a notification, and I flinched. Even routine alerts now felt like potential threats. The thought that someone could orchestrate events, manipulate digital records, and appear everywhere without my knowledge made the world feel smaller, more claustrophobic. I couldn't shake the feeling that Kevin wasn't the only predator out there, that there were people who thrived on watching, fabricating, and controlling the lives of those who trusted the ordinary flow of existence. For the first time, I understood why survivors never truly relax, why vigilance becomes a way of life. The system may catch the criminal, but it cannot erase the memory of manipulation, the lingering question of who else might be capable of the same cruelty. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, titanium rod pressing slightly against my spine as I stared at the photograph, heart pounding, and made a silent vow: I would never stop documenting, never stop questioning, never let my guard down, because the predator had taught me the most enduring lesson: the world will believe a lie faster than it will question the truth. And safety is a state we create for ourselves, not one we are granted. Even free from Kevin's immediate threat, the psychological shadow he left was permanent, a reminder that while the predator may be gone, the threat of deception, of being misrepresented and manipulated, is always real, always patient, and always waiting, and in that quiet, almost imperceptible tension, I realized, the nightmare had evolved, not ended, and true freedom would come not from victory, but from constant, unyielding awareness. The following weeks were a careful balancing act between reclaiming normalcy and fearing that normalcy was a trap, because every time I thought I was safe, a small detail reminded me that the world hadn't fully returned to order. My phone, my emails, even casual social media messages were scrutinized now with suspicion. I double-checked every notification, every friend request, every delivery notification, because the photograph from the anonymous envelope had proven one terrifying truth: someone had access to my movements, my schedule, and my reality, and it didn't take Kevin to make me feel powerless. I couldn't know if this was a copycat, a friend of his, or someone entirely new, but the principle was the same: when someone wants to manipulate you, no system guarantees protection, and no amount of vigilance feels sufficient. Patricia moved on cautiously, still polite, still grateful for my support, but her own fear lingered, subtle, unspoken, and I began noticing how easily a lie could worm its way into even the closest relationships, how quickly doubt could erode trust that once seemed absolute. I started documenting everything again, every text, every call, every minor medical visit, every detail that might one day be weaponized against me, creating a safety net out of evidence because instinct had taught me that innocence alone was worthless. One evening, while walking near the river, I noticed a man lingering near a cafe I frequented, someone who seemed to observe passers-by with a strange intensity. His posture, the way he scanned the street, triggered the same cold dread I'd felt when Kevin's deception first surfaced. And for a moment, my pulse spiked, my body tensing instinctively, my mind racing through every worst-case scenario. Had Kevin learned something in jail, or was this a completely new threat following the same blueprint? I paused, evaluating, calculating, noting license plates, facial features, clothing patterns, training myself to see patterns where others might only see coincidence, and realized that my life had shifted permanently. That vigilance wasn't temporary, it was a state I could never abandon, and that even in freedom, the predator's influence lingered, shaping my perception and actions. Later, I shared my observations with Marcus, who nodded gravely, confirming what I feared: the tools for surveillance, the methods for deception, and the audacity of a determined manipulator meant that even with Kevin behind bars, the threat of someone exploiting weaknesses like mine would always exist. That night, as I lay in bed, titanium rod pressing faintly against my spine, I reflected on the fragile boundaries of trust, the illusion of safety, and the realization that the most dangerous predators aren't always visible, and the most insidious threats are psychological. Even victory doesn't erase the lesson that truth must be defended constantly, that documentation and awareness are armor, and that freedom is never absolute when someone has proven they can manipulate reality itself. The world hadn't ended, but neither had the war to protect it, and as I drifted into a restless sleep, I understood the chilling truth: some threats leave no physical scars, but they mark the mind forever, and I would carry that awareness with me for the rest of my life. Even after Kevin was caught and the legal storm settled, I couldn't shake the feeling that the fight wasn't truly over. The court had cleared my name, Patricia had withdrawn her lawsuit, and the digital traces of his manipulation had been documented. Yet small, almost imperceptible signs reminded me that predators don't always vanish with justice: a shadow moving outside my building, a car parked too long on the street, the faint echo of unfamiliar footsteps near my apartment, and each one triggered the same visceral panic I felt in the hospital when I first opened that envelope, because I realized the danger had shifted from concrete accusations to psychological territory, to being watched and tested without knowing why, and that awareness alone could no longer protect me from what might come next. My daily routine became a careful choreography: timed walks, scanned streets, even checking patterns of delivery trucks and maintenance crews. Every detail I once ignored suddenly demanded scrutiny. Patricia's cautious texts reminded me that she was still navigating her own fear, and the thought that Kevin or someone like him could target anyone who was vulnerable, isolated, or under the radar, made the stakes feel infinitely larger than my own story. One evening, Marcus called after running a cross-check on recent security footage. A man resembling Kevin's former accomplice had been spotted near downtown locations I frequented, and while there was no direct threat yet, The implication was clear: someone might be testing me, gauging my responses, or simply reminding me that exposure could happen again. The titanium rod in my spine throbbed from stress and activity, and I understood that physical recovery was one thing, but rebuilding a sense of safety and trust was entirely another, a process that required constant vigilance, critical thinking, and the willingness to question even familiar faces. I began layering protections, new locks, monitored access, digital alerts on my phone, and strict documentation of interactions, a strategy that became both a shield and a trap, because it reminded me daily of what could go wrong, of how quickly perception could be manipulated, of how fragile reputation really is. Sleep came in fits, punctuated by dreams of Kevin, of someone stepping into my life disguised, of familiar places turning into traps, and each morning I faced a quiet tension that I had never anticipated, one that no court ruling could erase, one that changed how I moved, how I trusted, how I viewed the world. The lesson I couldn't ignore was stark: survival wasn't about defeating a single predator. It was about preparing for the possibility that predators existed everywhere, that they could exploit anyone, and that life after danger demanded a heightened awareness, a recalibration of what safety meant. I realized that even now, months later, freedom was fragile, the past could echo into the present, and the calm I felt was provisional, earned through vigilance, evidence, and the tireless support of those who believed in me, but never guaranteed. And in that quiet, persistent tension, I accepted a new truth: some battles leave marks that don't heal, some threats linger beyond arrest, and the cost of being targeted is not only measured in legal victories, but in the unshakable awareness that you are never entirely safe, that identity can be stolen, perception can be weaponized, and that real security is something you earn daily, never assume, and never let go of. Months have passed since Kevin Dutton was removed from Patricia's life, and while the physical scars of my surgery fade and my spine slowly strengthens, the most significant change is not in my body, it is in my understanding. I am no longer the helpless target I was during those 4 months in the hospital. Every phone call, every security camera, every photograph that once threatened to define me now serves as proof that vigilance, method, and evidence can protect the innocent. I understand the mechanics of manipulation in a way I never did before: how someone can twist appearances, weaponize technology, exploit trust, and make the world believe a carefully constructed lie, and I have seen firsthand how easily it can be done, but also how effectively it can be dismantled when approached deliberately. This knowledge has become my armor, my authority, and my lens for moving forward. I teach myself to read warning signs, to anticipate deception, to document every interaction, and to trust evidence over instinct alone. Patricia and I have a cautious connection now, not because fear dominates our lives, but because clarity has replaced uncertainty. We understand the game that was played around us, and we know its rules. My children, my friends, anyone I care about, are now part of that awareness. They do not live in fear, but in informed caution, guided by someone who has survived the strategy and emerged not just intact, but capable. The titanium rod in my spine is more than a reminder of physical endurance. It is a symbol of strategic persistence, of learning to operate under duress, of reclaiming agency when forces beyond your control try to define you. And while danger still exists in the world, I am no longer naive about it, nor am I powerless. I understand now how identity can be manipulated, how perception can be weaponized, and how systems may fail, but I also know how to respond, how to counteract deception, how to document, and how to bring truth to light. In sharing this story, I am not merely recounting survival, I am asserting authority, offering guidance, and establishing a model for defending oneself when the stakes are both personal and public. The fear that once paralyzed me is replaced with strategic awareness. The uncertainty that once gnawed at me is replaced with informed action, and the confusion that once threatened my reputation is replaced with a blueprint for navigating the invisible threats that lurk in modern life. I am no longer just a survivor, I am someone who knows the rules of the game, who has observed the predator's moves, and who now possesses the tools, knowledge, and experience to act decisively. And that is the final lesson I leave not just for myself, but for anyone who might find themselves in a similar position. The world can misrepresent you, technology can be turned against you, and manipulation can feel absolute, but authority, preparation, and evidence are permanent weapons that cannot be stolen. Truth, when recognized and defended, becomes unassailable. And knowing how it works is the ultimate freedom. Months have passed since the nightmare ended. And in that time I've realized that what happened to me was never about the papers, the photographs, or even the lies. It was about how a man responds when the world tries to rewrite his identity while he is powerless to stop it. I am no longer the man who woke up bedridden, frightened by accusations I could not possibly defend myself against. I am no longer the man who spent hours questioning whether reality itself could be trusted, whether the people I loved, the system I relied on, and even the truth in front of my eyes could be distorted and weaponized. That man existed once, but he has been replaced by someone who understands the rules of perception, the fragile line between truth and manipulation, and the power of documentation, evidence, and deliberate action. My back has healed, my body is strong again, and my reputation has been restored, but the true recovery was internal, learning to reclaim authority over my own life, to move through the world without being shaken by illusions or attempts at control. I learned the value of precision, the importance of timing, the necessity of verifying every claim, and the power that comes from methodically building proof, piece by piece, until no one could deny the reality I lived. My relationships are intact now, built on trust that has been tested and proven, not assumed. Friends, family, even casual acquaintances see the calm, measured man, but they do not realize the depth of what was endured, the quiet vigilance that became second nature, and the careful strategy it took to survive both legally and psychologically. The titanium rod in my spine, which once symbolized fragility and recovery, now represents resilience, endurance, and the strength that comes from navigating extreme circumstances while refusing to surrender. I have learned how identity can be stolen, how perception can be manipulated, and how quickly the world can be misled when someone decides to fabricate reality. But I have also learned that the truth, once gathered and presented clearly, is a weapon far stronger than deception. Today, when I look in the mirror, I see not the victim of a meticulously orchestrated attack but a man who has mastered both himself and the circumstances that tried to define him unfairly. I see someone who knows the weight of evidence, the value of patience, and the importance of decisively reclaiming one's narrative. I see certainty where there was once doubt, authority where there was once vulnerability, and strength where there was once fear. This is the man who emerged from the chaos, disciplined, alert, unshakable, and fully in command of his identity, his actions, and his life. That is who I am today, and that is the lasting measure of what surviving this ordeal has truly created: clarity, resilience, and an unbreakable command of reality itself. Looking back now, months after the chaos, the lawsuits, the impersonation, and the months I spent bedridden, I realized that the ordeal did more than test my resilience. It fundamentally reshaped how I move through life, how I measure trust, and how I understand the world around me. I've learned that identity, reputation, and truth are fragile constructs that can be manipulated by someone willing to exploit technology, social assumptions, and the gaps between what is seen and what is known. I've seen how easily evidence can be fabricated, how convincingly a false narrative can be constructed, and how quickly people, even those closest to you, can believe a lie if it feels plausible enough. But I've also learned that this fragility has a counterweight: patience, documentation, and the courage to fight when you cannot physically act, to think clearly when the situation demands logic over emotion, and to seek allies who see truth the way you do. I now approach every interaction, every piece of information, and every decision with a heightened awareness of risk and consequence, not out of paranoia, but out of experience. I know the weight of scrutiny, the power of evidence, and the absolute necessity of verifying facts before making judgments. I've also learned that vulnerability is not weakness. It is simply the landscape where skill, patience, and strategy can demonstrate their value. The titanium rod in my spine, once a symbol of brokenness, now reminds me every day that endurance can coexist with fragility, that time and proper support can allow recovery, and that the measures you take during your weakest moments define the strength you carry forward. I've shared my story not to dwell on fear or relive the threat, but to illuminate the principles that emerged from it: vigilance paired with calm, knowledge paired with action, preparation paired with courage. I understand now that predators like Kevin Dutton thrive on isolation and disbelief. But the most powerful response is not anger or fear, it is clarity and evidence, and the unwavering commitment to truth. These lessons are mine, but they are universal, because anyone can be targeted. Anyone can have their identity questioned. And anyone can face circumstances that feel impossible to overcome. What separates those who survive from those who are consumed is the willingness to observe, document, and act with precision, even when physically or emotionally constrained. And yet, even with all this understanding, I've learned to live again, to trust cautiously but fully, to rebuild relationships, to enjoy life, and to work toward goals without allowing past threats to define the present. My recovery, my clarity, and my regained agency are not just personal victories, they are a framework for anyone navigating a world where perception can be weaponized. I walk forward with the certainty that knowledge, preparation, and patience are as essential as strength and resilience, that the mistakes of the past can be studied without being repeated, and that even in the face of deliberate chaos, it is possible to reclaim your life fully. This is the man I am now, experienced, cautious but empowered, observant, unshakable, and prepared to act if deception ever surfaces again, not living in fear, but living in mastery, carrying forward lessons forged in the most extreme circumstances, ready to face whatever comes next with clarity and strength. As I step into each day now, long after the lawsuits, the impersonation, and the months of helpless recovery, I carry a clarity I never had before, not just about what happened, but about who I am in the face of chaos. The titanium rod in my spine, a permanent reminder of vulnerability, now feels like a marker of survival, a symbol of what can endure when patience, preparation, and meticulous attention are applied in the most desperate circumstances. I've learned that life can be weaponized against you in ways that feel impossible to defend against, identity can be stolen, narratives can be twisted, and perception alone can feel like it has power over truth. But I've also learned that truth itself has a weight that cannot be ignored, and that when documented, verified, and presented clearly, it becomes unassailable. I approach my relationships differently now, I listen more carefully, observe more thoroughly, and understand that trust is a skill as much as it is a gift. I don't hand it away lightly, but I don't withhold it from those who earn it either. Professionally, personally, and even in the smallest interactions, I've become intentional, recognizing that choices made in moments of weakness or uncertainty can ripple outward in ways we rarely predict. Yet, it's not just vigilance that defines this new chapter, it's agency. I am no longer passive in the face of circumstance. I act when necessary, I prepare before chaos, and I refuse to allow systems, technology, or manipulative individuals to define my reality. I've also come to understand the responsibility that comes with surviving something that could have ended differently, to share the lessons learned, to teach caution without fear, to demonstrate that resilience is built not in moments of comfort, but in moments of extreme challenge. I think often about the people who might face something similar, someone who wakes up one day to find their life misrepresented, their reputation assaulted, or their safety undermined, and I recognize how critical it is to be methodical, deliberate, and disciplined. The digital trails, the evidence, the people who stand with you, these are more than conveniences. They are shields and levers in a world where appearances can deceive. And yet, with all this understanding, I've reclaimed joy and purpose. I walk without hesitation. I engage with friends and family without suspicion clouding every interaction. And I plan for a future informed by experience rather than paralyzed by fear. This is not a story of luck, nor of divine intervention. It's the story of preparation meeting circumstance, of clarity overcoming chaos, and of persistence in the face of impossibility. Today, I teach, I advise, I rebuild, and I live fully, carrying forward every lesson, every precaution, and every triumph that came from the months when my life was turned upside down. I am aware, I am prepared, but above all, I am free, free to act, free to trust judiciously, free to live without the weight of false accusations hanging over me. And that is the ultimate takeaway: survival alone is not enough. To truly emerge from a storm, you must understand the rules, anticipate the moves of those who would deceive, and walk forward with confidence shaped by experience. The man I was, vulnerable, bedridden, doubted, no longer exists. In his place stands someone who has endured, who has mastered the art of defense in both the literal and figurative sense, who carries forward lessons hard-earned and unshakable. I tell this story so that others understand, the world may bend perception, manipulate truth, and try to crush even the strongest among us, but it cannot defeat a mind armed with patience, evidence, and unwavering clarity. I am that man now, and anyone who listens carefully can become the same. Looking back, surviving everything wasn't just about enduring chaos, it was about understanding it, learning its patterns, and acting with precision when control seemed gone. Every misstep could have destroyed me, every careful choice became a lifeline. What I want you to take away isn't just my story, it's a way to see the mechanisms behind deception, manipulation, and threats that can appear ordinary until they aren't. I've reclaimed my life and rebuilt trust cautiously, but more importantly, I've learned the rules that let me defend reality itself. And that knowledge, once earned, becomes a shield. In the next video, I'll show exactly how manipulation begins, how targets are chosen, and how systems are quietly exploited, the small moves people don't notice until it's too late. This isn't theory, it's practical, observable, and, if ignored, dangerous. You won't just witness what happens to someone under pressure, you'll see the points where control can slip, where perception can be twisted, and how to stop it before it escalates. And this is the critical part, the story I lived wasn't only about fear or survival, it was about understanding. And now you can see it too. By the end of the next video, you won't just be curious, you'll be ready. You'll recognize the signs, anticipate the tactics, and know what to do before it's too late. That's the difference between being caught in a nightmare and being prepared to navigate it. Remember, knowledge is the one thing no one can take from you, and insight is more powerful than luck. So stay sharp, internalize this carefully, and be ready to act. What changes isn't just what you know, it's who you become, alert, informed, and confident in the face of deception. That's the transformation I want you to leave with. If you carry that forward, the next video isn't optional, it's necessary. You're not just watching a story unfold anymore, you're learning the rules that protect you in ways few ever understand. And when it ends, you'll see how far awareness alone can reach, and why mastering it matters more than anything else.